Hello, and welcome back to the Retro Ups and Downs, which it's funny to say that I've missed doing the Retro Ups and Downs, but we have had the Ups and Downs to do. So it's not like I haven't been doing Ups and Downs, but we've been doing retro ones and now my head hurts. But we're very happy to be back. We are obviously reeling from the fallout from season 5 of Discovery. So just in case anybody was wondering why we've chosen this episode, I guess, spoiler alert? Look, fair is fair. Spoiler alert for season 5 Discovery, folks. Yeah. Remember, we have a podcast that drops every single Tuesday on the channel, so please keep an eye out for that one. We have some fantastic interviews with some Trek alumni and current Trek stars as well. Dotted throughout the channel, please keep an eye out for those as well. And of course, now we're going to start ramping up news to what new shows we've coming as well. So won't that all be fun? Yes, it will. But before we do any of that, I would like to take a trip back in time, actually more than 30 years. Shall we chase? Yes, we are, of course, covering the 6th season episode of The Next Generation, The Chase, today. It is a seminal piece of Star Trek television, and funny enough, long before anything this year, it was just an enjoyable hour of television, or 45 minutes of television, and it's been so much fun to go back through it for today with a new lens. So straight in, we're going to go with an up for Norman Lloyd as Professor Galen. Norman Lloyd brings this massive screen presence when he's there in the observation lounge in the beginning. The whole setup to this episode is that he has arrived on the Enterprise. He is the former archaeology professor of Captain Jean-Luc Picard, or Mr. Picard, and he is there to tease the possibility of one of the greatest discoveries of our lifetime. Well, or their lifetime, or somebody else's lifetime, or a lot of lifetimes, as it turns out. I think every second he's on screen, he holds the action directly in place. I think it's absolutely a credit to him. I mean, the man was Hollywood royalty. He worked with Alfred Hitchcock. He was over 100 when he passed away, making him one of the oldest performers, or oldest surviving performers to have ever been in Star Trek. Have I phrased that right? I hope I have. Anyway, he lived a good long life, so he did, and he's brilliant in this episode. I did enjoy as well the constant referral to Mr. Picard, or should I say Captain Picard. And then I do like the fact that, Jean-Luc just goes, oh no, Mr. Picard is fine. We're not on a first name basis here. No, it's Professor and Mr. That's an up from me. I enjoyed that. Hey, listen, he's earned that right. This entire opening scene, of course, taking place in the observation lounge, where Professor Galen has brought the Kurlan Naskos, which is, of course, something that we would see later on in Star Trek as well. Make sure as well that you stick around for the Temporal observations, which will take place at the end of this episode. This is said to be a priceless artifact, a remnant from the Third Dynasty. In fact, very fancy altogether. It is clearly something that will be shown a lot of reverence and respect, definitely in the films. Another quick up for this episode, of course, is the fact that it was directed by none other than Jonathan Frakes, who, several years later, would possibly return to this story in some way or another. Temporal observations, folks, temporal observations. The question posed, the entire kickoff for this episode, is that Professor Galen has made a discovery of such profound implications that it is something that's going to affect the quadrant for generations to come. And what he wants to do is he wants to share in that with Mr. Picard. So they have that conversation in 10 Forward, wherein they don't get too into details because, as Galen said, well, I can't give you everything for free. This comes at a price, and the price is journey with me. And Picard goes off to think about it, which gets our great scene, which is an up, of course, of that morning tea that he has with Beverly. And I really enjoyed those scenes when they were shown, because obviously we know where Picard and Crusher get to, thanks to Star Trek Picard. But even just these chill scenes during The Next Generation, just again, it helped to sell how friendly they are and how much they confide in each other. But there was a great moment again where Picard in this scene shows that despite this amazing offer, and for an archaeologist this would be, what bigger offer could there be? But no, he said he never even questioned, he couldn't leave the Enterprise. That's an up, because I find that very consistent with Picard's role as captain of the Enterprise, that as tantalizing as this might be, his place is here, on the bridge of his ship and throughout the ship. And I really, really, really dug that. My first down of the episode, which I'm going to put there's an asterisk on this one, but my down for the episode is Galen is an asshole about it. There's not even, it's not a case of I am disappointed. Oh, no, you're terrible, your career is terrible, you're a dilettante in terms of a scholar, you're this, you're that. He doesn't take it well. So, you're getting it down for that. I understand this means a lot to you. And, no one speaks to my boy JL like that. Galen then leaves in a huff and, takes his shuttle, that's the end of it, storms off the ship, and this is clearly sticking in Picard's mind over the next few days. They're en route to a conference on Italia 7 that's said to be very important, but of course I'd say it's about as exciting as watching paint dry. And then they get the notification there's a distress signal coming from Professor Galen. His shuttle is under attack. So his shuttle's under attack and they're like, oh, that's not good. Show me on the screen. And straight away, that's fine. There's the shuttle. There's a Uridian destroyer, in fact. And they say, open fire, and Worf fires phasers, which I'll come back to in a second. But how the hell did they get there so fast? That was a down for me. There's no kind of like, all right, Graham, we need to get there in a certain time. No, it's like there. And yeah, it was like, oh, but Galen's been gone for weeks at this point. That's the other thing. There is a question of how long the events take in this episode. It's, suggested that there would be days. It's suggested that sometimes it's weeks. It is really unclear. And this scene, I think, is a great example of that. Galen's shuttle being under attack by the Iridians, they order Mr. Worf to fire. And Worf fires a phaser burst, which destroys the Iridian ship straight away. And this straight away has echoes of Unification to me, the smuggler ship that explodes because it was too filled with armaments. Down, at least in Unification, we got an explanation as to why the phaser burst destroyed the ship. Here, the Iridian destroyer is completely destroyed. Riker goes, Worf! Worf goes, this shouldn't have happened. The phaser burst shouldn't have been strong enough. And that's the last time we talk about it. The Iridians, I guess. Galen survives just long enough to be brought to sickbay. Picard, he does get that final apology from Galen where he says, I was too harsh. So, in terms of closure, that's nice. But all that really does is set the ground for this mystery. What was Galen after? Why would the Iridians want to steal it? Well, as we know, the Iridians are information dealers. So, most definitely, they were there to steal it, to sell it to somebody else. We get this series of numbers, and after some jiggery-pokery, we figure out that these are DNA markers, if you will. They're said to be from different planets throughout the quadrant, so there shouldn't be any compatibility. Now, this is an up from me, because this is one of the things that I think this episode does so well, is it gives you a clue, then we get to the next clue and the next one, and it's so tantalizing. It just drags you along. That I really, as it's working it out almost in real time or across weeks, depending on, and they travel from planet to planet. The first one they go to is Rua 4, and they find there's nothing there, and then they decide that they're going to go to Indri 8. Good, it's good. It's a good chase episode. I mean, clues in the title. If there was one thing where I think it goes maybe a little bit too far is Picard goes from he really does care about this chase, but he's also, the whole point he stayed on the Enterprise is because this is his career. He is a Starfleet officer, and that leads him to butt heads with both Riker and Troy. I am going to give it a down. I think he's a little bit too singular in these moments, and also they don't really get much of a resolution. He's just an ass. So that for me stuck out a little bit, unfortunately. And then when we get to Indri 8, we have another bit of a down for Indri 8. So they arrive in orbit and we see that all life on the planet is being destroyed by a plasma reaction that is certainly not natural. It's said that there's no humanoid species, but still, it's all life on the planet is being destroyed. That's a down. I mean, it's not only genocide if it's against humanoids. And if it is, I think we should expand the meaning of the word. because this planet has just been deliberately destroyed and rendered uninhabitable. I mean, the only thing I can imagine next is to see the Defiant flying away, having just delivered 2 trilithium. Anyway, listen, we won't get into that. The next part of the journey takes us into contact with 2 Cardassian warships. And I have to say, that is an up for me for Gul Osset. I really like how she is controlled and yet scenery chewing, and in a very Cardassian way. Remember, of course, this was season 6 of Next Generation, so this is very early doors DS9 as well. So we were kind of learning about Cardassians on the fly, and I think she's very, very good in every scene that she's in. I cannot say the same for Nudak, who is a down from me. He doesn't chew the scenery, he swallows the entire set, vomits it back up again and starts chewing the next bit. Way, way, way over the top. It feels like someone said, by the way, Klingons, they're a bit highly strung, and he just rolled with it. So yeah, Nudak was definitely a down for me. And also, hang on. Trellium down for me. Absolutely nothing happens to Nudak over destroying Injury 8. All life on a planet, whether it was Federation or not, they don't even talk about it. It's like, oh God, yeah, because it was Nudak that destroyed the planet. He wiped out all of life so that no one could follow him on this chase for the clue. And, like, I'm sorry. The fact that it wasn't a Federation war, just nothing. Nothing's going to happen. The Klingon High Council is okay with this. There's not going to be any comeback. That's too much of a logical down for me. That's why that's Trellium. Aboard the Enterprise, you've got Picard, you've got Gul Osset, and you've got the War Criminal. Okay, so you've got Nudak sitting there in the observation lines, and I do like this forced cooperation moment that goes on between them. Picard effectively says, we can pool our resources, or you can all piss off. They pool their resources. And it leads to that fun scene in the science lab where Nudak goes, oh, we shared our advantage for nothing. And they're like, lads, come on, like, we'll figure it out. There's still a missing piece. It's going to take them time to figure where the last piece is, but now they've got enough of the map that it's just a case of processing. Nudak is a down for me, and all that, but the Bahat Cool, that's an up from me. Oh, I like that, just brilliant, because Data just puts him in his place. And then he tries to bribe Data. Dishonor. Dishonor on you, dishonor on your house, dishonor on your cow. No. God's sake, Nudak. It was quite fun to see him headbutt Data and then fall over, though, I will say that. And also, a very quiet moment in this episode that tends to, I think, get forgotten a little bit in all of the mystery of everything. Good man, Geordi. That's an up for me. Geordi spotting what was being done or attempted to be done to the defenses, which leads to the good ploy. Of course, it was the Cardassians that were attempting to get the advantage, so they get enough of a warning that both the Enterprise and the Klingon ship can feign distress, or the Enterprise feigns it a little bit better than the Klingon one does. The Cardassians, they flip off then to the next sector, thinking they're one step ahead. And meanwhile, everyone just walks onto the bridge, totally chilled, taken up from me. With all the processing done, the Enterprise arrives with Nudak on the bridge at Vilmore 2. Now, they know that they're only ahead by a matter of seconds, minutes or hours. Time means nothing in this episode. And they beam down to a fossilized seabed that still contains some organic material, which they think is going to be the final part of the clue. Spoiler, it is. But they get there, the Cardassians beam in straight away, thinking, haha, we've got you. And then twist, the Romulans are also as part of this chase. I wonder if that's going to become important, but taken up Maris Roves as the Romulan commander, actually, who I think just has that calm and that cool that the Romulans so often do. Really, really worked for me in this scene. This, of course, leads us to, as there's a little bit of, kind of scenery chewing from the Klingons, including, I'm sad to say, Worf, and the Cardassians and Romulans all bumping heads. Crusher and Picard are like, that's cute, we're going to actually do the science here. And so they do, which activates Salome Gens. I choose to believe that this is how we activate Salome Gens in real life as well, is that we combine all these DNA strands, and it's just, anyway. This is Salome Gens appearing in Star Trek as the first progenitor that was ever seen on screen. And we get this beautiful, poignant revelation that the progenitors are the ones who seeded all of the primordial worlds with their own DNA code, in the perhaps naive hope that as evolution would take place and we would get races like the Klingons, the Romulans, the Cardassians, and of course humanity, that they would have to work together to return to this planet, Vilmore 2. I will say it's not clear that if it could have been whenever the last part happened, so it could have been maybe on any of the worlds, I will say that, but that it would activate this message so that all the progenitors could do is just tell people that they once existed. There's a beautiful comment. This stands as a monument not to our greatness, but that there is a part of us in each of you, which means there is a part of you in each other. And I thought, wonderful. That is an absolute up for me. And that message, you must work together and you must look past your petty enmities. That was easy Latin up for me. As Picard says, it would have been good if this had not fallen on such deaf ears, because at that time, the Cardassians, the Romulans, the Klingons, and the humans don't have an awful lot in common. And it looks as though that's the end of it. We've made this major revelation that just goes nowhere because they just weren't ready to hear it, except for that one final scene where the Romulan commander hails Picard, saying ostensibly, we're about to pull out of orbit. Perhaps one day, the implications of this discovery will be seen for what it is. And that is an up from me. It was an up for me watching it in 1993. I might not have understood the concept of ups and downs the way that I do now, back in 1993, but it is an up for me then, and it's an up for me now, because that idea that we must work together to better ourselves is Star Trek to the core. Now, will you please join me at the temporal observations? Now, we will discuss the very obvious temporal observation in a moment, don't get me wrong, but there is also other bits that we must point out first. First of all, right at the beginning, there's Lieutenant J. Hello, Tracy DeCoco, who is in so much of Star Trek, and hashtag bring back J. I'm okay with this. The Kurlan Naskos, this massive archaeological find. It's complete, it's incredible. We must always treat it with care. So in Star Trek Generations, after the Enterprise D saucer crashes, when Picard's going through his ready room and just picks it up and just tosses it to the side, oh, that didn't age very well, did it? We get a reference, actually, which I had totally forgotten this reference was there, to the Satarans of Sothis 3. Professor Galen talks about them. The Satarans attempted to take control of the Enterprise D in the episode Conundrum, because Commander Kieran McDuff, who was of course a Sataran posing as a Starfleet officer, tried to get them involved in their war with the Lycians. Thankfully, he was exposed, but did not know that they had popped up in this episode again. Very, very nice. There is a moment in this episode that has aged like poor milk. Galen is trying to convince Picard to come with him on this expedition. And to do it, he says, imagine, if you could feel how these several historical archaeologists felt. And he mentions a couple of, Star Trek created archaeologists, but he also mentions Schliemann about, how he must have felt when he discovered Troy. So I went online and I did a little bit of research. So yes, Schliemann did discover what was later identified as the remains of Troy, as we know it from, the Trojan horse, that Troy, and that war. More specifically, what he discovered was an area that was a collection of cities, Troy 1, Troy 2, Troy 3, up to about Troy, I believe Troy at least 7 or 8. So it was a massive archaeological find. However, in his excavations of Troy, he did so much damage that, in fact, when writing about this, Kenneth W. Harl claimed Schliemann destroyed Troy more efficiently than the Greeks ever could have. Greeks of history, by the way, Greeks of today, lovely people. It was that he was very general in his descriptions, and he was not altogether honest in what he said as well. Talked about finding King Priam's gold. Nope. Talked about finding Helen's jewels. Nope. And, kind of the manner of these things, all of these things have been dated about 1,000 years before when the Battle of Troy was said to have happened. So, frankly, he was trying to big up his discovery an awful lot. Not exactly someone you want to use as an example for, wouldn't you like to feel like him? No, not really. But I'm sorry to say, it gets worse. When he was excavating the city, he discovered an awful lot of cracked pottery, as you would, that were adorned with swastikas. He then consulted the Aryan nationalist Émile Louis Burnouf, who would claim that the swastikas were connected to Aryan nationalism. So, Schliemann is credited as being the person who initially connected the swastika to what of course would later go on to be Aryan nationalism, the Nazi Party. This is not someone who you want to be in the same breath with when it comes to archaeological importance. That is one that aged badly. Now, moving swiftly on from that unpleasantness, Picard, when he is talking about Galen, he says, "I had a father, but he feels like a father who understood me." Now, we know, of course, that Maurice Picard existed. We see Maurice in at least a Q-induced vision in Tapestry, but we then later see Maurice as played by James Callis in the Star Trek Picard episode Monsters. Now, Star Trek Picard Season 2 does get a little bit of critique, and I won't say that we don't critique it either, we do, but Monsters is one of the better episodes of the second season. I think primarily because of the performances in that. James Callis is fantastic as Maurice Picard, and particularly helps to flesh out the character an awful lot more from the rather one-dimensional version of Picard that was described in The Next Generation. One of Galen's proposed stops along the way is DS4. Now, apart from the obvious connection DS4, DS9, if we jump forward actually to Star Trek Voyager, DS4 is the one location that had a mention of Seven of Nine's family, the Hansons, as they were leaving to go on their studies of the Borg. This is said that there was one file about the Hansons. Janeway finds it in the episode The Gift. Later on, of course, we find out that DS4 was decommissioned in 2400. This is when Picard slips up when they're on board the Titan A, trying to convince Captain Shaw to take the Titan A out to the Righton system. Unfortunately, that's how Shaw goes, "Yeah, no." Professor Galen is flying a Type 7 shuttle. Now, these were quite popular in the early days of the Next Generation. It's sort of a sleeker version of the Type 6 that we would then see from the 5th season onwards. We see a Uridian destroyer as well. Now, we had seen Uridian destroyers in Star Trek, and the Uridians would probably play their biggest part in The Next Generation in the two-part episode Birthright, when the Uridian, played by James Cromwell, who of course we probably best know as Zefram Cochrane from Star Trek First Contact, takes Worf to meet, well, he hopes to meet Moog, but no, it just turns out there's a bunch of Klingons in the jungle living with the Romulans. It's all a lot of fun, really. The Science Lab appears here, which plays quite a few roles in the 6th season of The Next Generation. Also, as the Klingon, as Nudok counts up, he gets to number 3, which is Wage. Now, of course, I cannot hear Wage without hearing Wage Douche, and it immediately makes me think of the Lower Decks episode Wage Douche, where we get 3 ships and they're all in the lower decks, and I just love that episode so much. So thank you, The Chase, for reminding me of that episode. Data's skull is said to be partly built out of duranium. Now, duranium turns up in Star Trek all the time. Most recently in the Emissary Ups and Downs that we did, we talked about duranium shadows and Thoron fields that can be, fool sensors into thinking there's large stockpiles of weapons. This actually crosses over into Star Wars. Duranium is said to be light and durable and slightly lightsaber resistant. And I like to think that Data is lightsaber resistant. So that works for me there. The planet is Vilmore 2. Much more recently than that, we suspected that in the Discovery episode Life Itself, one of the potential planets seen through the lobby was Vilmore 2, for obvious reasons. Salome Jens, who appears as the progenitor here, would go on to appear obviously many times in Deep Space Nine, as the female changeling. Now then, of course, the big one is the progenitors. So they are introduced here. We get much more discussion of them in the 5th season of Star Trek Discovery, as it is the progenitors technology that spurs on the events of most of the 5th season of Discovery. We get the whole chase against Maul and Locke. We get the Breen are involved as well. It was so fantastic to see this episode revisited after 30 years, because it did feel like it was way too big of a revelation that it would not be revisited again. This is one of those episodes that Because it hadn't been expanded on, this was a great one and done. That really felt like, we should have addressed it, but we did. Writing afterwards, Ronald D. Moore said that they believed the progenitors were the same race as the preservers, which had been introduced in the original series as well, on the planet with Miramani and Kirk goes native. And anyway, listen, the obelisks are cool. So tying together these ancient races in Star Trek's history, and 1,000 years later, we still would be finding out things about the progenitors and about how they used others' technology to help seed all of these primordial worlds. I do love how this story, if it is in fact resolved, which I think the door is still open for more, I do like how it's been revisited and how it became, this episode went from being a thoroughly enjoyable episode to one of the biggest mysteries and exciting chases in Star Trek history. That's everything for our episode today, folks. We hope you enjoyed this retro ups and downs, and of course we hope you enjoy them as we go forward with them as well. Going forward, of course, we will revert back to what we did before. We will put up a poll on our social medias so that people can vote on what they would like to see covered in these episodes. We will listen, we will post, we will probably discuss them in our various podcasts as well. Thank you so much everyone who is subscribing. Over 300,000 subscribers. You are awesome, you are wonderful. Please make sure that you're following on the various socials. I'm at Seán Ferrick. You can obviously get at Chris Edit on the various socials as well, and at TrekCulture is the big one. Thank you so much. Until I see you again, make sure that you live long and prosper, make sure you look after yourself, and to everyone out there, please lead with peace, lead with kindness, and perhaps take a second when you see something that creates a strong visceral reaction in yourself. Take a second. So much of the time we have these knee-jerk fights with each other. We need to learn and we need to talk, because we are all, to get very mushy, on the theme of the episode, there is a part of each and every one of us in each other. We need to remember that, and we need to try and work together, because that's the only way we have a future. So folks, on that note, look after yourself. Thank you so much. I will see you soon. Cheers.